Vayom Hashem el Moshe, Emor la Kohanim b'nei Aaron. So Parshas Emor, which is coming up this Shabbos, right? Parshas Emor, is all about laws of Kohanim. Okay? Now, there's a very interesting, listen to this, very interesting. He brings it down in the new Otra Polos HaTorah. In the Meseches Boba Metzia, it says that one time Rabbi Bar Avuha met Eliyahu Hanavi, who was coming out of a non-Jewish cemetery. Beit Kvodot Shel Goyim. Okay? So the first question that should come to all your minds is, Eliyahu Hanavi, what was he? A Kohen, Levi, or Yisrael? Kohen. How do you know he was a Kohen? Because they say he was a Gilgul of Pinchas. And Pinchas was a Kohen. Okay? Problem is Pinchas wasn't even a Kohen Gadol. We won't even go there. Right? He was Pinchas. Bless you. So Shalu Rabbi Bar Avuha. So Rabbi Bar Avuha asked him, Kivot she Kohenu, since you're a Kohen, how could you be in a cemetery?
Yeah, problem.
Ono lo Eliyahu, so Eliyahu Hanavi answered, Shekivrei akum eno matami. The graves of non-Jews are not tummy. Fascinating answer. That means the tumah comes from the loss of a neshama. That means a person is not tummy because they have a neshama. When the neshama goes, they're tummy. So, since a Jew has a neshama that has 613 mitzvot, that loss of the neshama makes you tummy. A non-Jew doesn't. What's fascinating about it is that near Shar HaRachamim, the gate that Moshiach is supposed to come through, or Eliyahu Hanavi is supposed to come through, what did the Arabs do? They closed the gate, big deal, but they built a cemetery right at the foot of the gate. If you go to Israel by Shar HaRachamim, right there along the entire Shar HaRachamim is an Arab cemetery. Not very big, just enough to put 3 or 4 rows of graves. Thinking, I mean, you gotta think, they put a cemetery by Shar HaRachamim because they knew that Eliyahu Hanavi is a Kohen and he can't go through a cemetery. This way he can't announce Mashiach's coming. This is their thinking. I mean, if you already believe he's a Kohen, you already believe in Mashiach, so how could you be Goyim? You got to be Jewish already. You know, it's so amazing. You believe all these things, and you don't care. I'm going to rebel against God anyway. But the Gemara says over here, Eliyahu Hanavi says, what am I worried about? Kivrei Goyim neinu atami. Doctors, Kohanim who want to be doctors, run into a problem. How can they study anatomy? They have to work on bodies, and the universities have bodies that are donated. The answer is, that they often give is, that most of the donated bodies are not Jewish bodies. Yeah. If they're not Jewish bodies, well, they don't make a stomach. That's what doctors who are Kohanim, who become doctors, that's what they say. Not such an easy answer, not so universally accepted. There are many rabbis who will tell Kohanim, don't become doctors, you can't go through the training. Okay? But that's what their answer is. The Rokeach, which was one of the Bali Atosos, he says a tremendous chidush. He says, okay, I understand that you're not afraid to go into a non-Jewish cemetery. But Rabbi Bar Avuha asked Eliyahu, what are you doing here? Yeah. That means, okay, I got it. It doesn't make you Tomei. But you hang around non-Jewish cemeteries? Is that where you're going to find Eliyahu Hanavi? Visiting a Goyish cemetery? Doesn't make sense. So Eliyahu Hanavi answered him, I came to save a particular non-Jew because he did a great act of chesed to a Jew. And I want to protect him from Gehenna. So Eliyahu Hanavi comes down from Shamayim, goes into a non-Jewish cemetery that just buried a non-Jew to save that person's type of neshama that doesn't make him tamei, because he was one of the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam, and therefore he wanted to protect him from that. So it's very, very fascinating. What?
You said non-Jew.
Chesed.
He did a kindness. Okay, there's a story, famous story. People heard the story. I said it last night. People heard the story. of a Kohen who was married for 15 years and had no children with his wife. And they decided that, listen, it's crazy that they have no children, so they decided they're going to get divorced. They got divorced, and he found out a few weeks later she was pregnant.
Can you marry her back?
You cannot marry her back because a Kohen cannot marry a divorced woman, which is very interesting. The Chidah writes that his last name was Azulai. He says Azulai is a common name for Kohanim.
His last name was last name.
Right. Why? Azulai stands for Isha Zona v'Chalola Lo Yikach. A Kohen cannot marry a woman who's a Zona or Chalala. So it says the name Azulai is Roshei Tevot, the instructions to a Kohen who he can marry, who he cannot. Fascinating. They bring down from the Seride Eish, very interesting. The Seride Eish was a big posek, and there was a particular Kohen who always had a temper. And he would come to the Seride Eish and he'd say, I want to divorce my wife. So the Seride Eish would say, well, you know, when you divorce your wife, the sofer writes the get, and the man has to put the get in the wife's hand. Is your wife Tohor or is she a Nida? She's a Nida. Well, you know, you can't put the get in his hand. Now that's not true. We don't care. Many people who get divorced have been separated for months. So the wife stopped going to mikvah and you're allowed to put it in her hand. But he made this up, the Seride Eish, because he knew this Kohen was just an angry person. And if I push him off, he'll calm down. And every time he would come, and he'd say, I want to get my wife a divorce. And he would say, did she go to mikvah? No, she didn't go to mikvah. He said, but we have to wait. And when she went to mikvah 3 months later, whatever it was, he had passed and he never came back. Okay. Eventually, the Seride Eish moved to Israel. And a new rabbi took over his job somewhere in Europe. And this Kohen had a fight with his wife, and he comes into the rabbi and he says, I want to divorce my wife. And the rabbi says, no problem. The sofer will be here tomorrow, we're going to write the get. So he says, but my wife didn't go to mikvah. So the rabbi says, she doesn't have to go to mikvah. The halacha says you're allowed to give her the get anyway. You're divorcing her, you're allowed to give it to her. So he says, no, that's not what the Seride Eish says. He says, well, it can't be. The Seride Eish knew the halacha. He doesn't make things up. So he wrote a letter to the Seride Eish. So the Seride Eish wrote him back saying, don't be such a big tzaddik. If the guy said that I wouldn't give a get until the wife went to mikvah, you should follow what I said. He wrote back, well, you're wrong, and I'm going to follow the halacha. And of course, he divorced the Kohen, and the Kohen changed his mind after he calmed down, and he wanted to get remarried, and he wouldn't, and he made this rabbi's life miserable till they fired the rabbi and he lost his job. So the Seride Eish says, you know, sometimes the halacha says A, but sometimes there's another Shulchan Aruch called common sense. And you have to be able to read the situation. Anyway, this Kohen married 15 years, couldn't have children, and he divorced his wife. So he went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Reb Chaim Kanievsky said, I don't know what to do for you. You know, there's always these different heterim. Maybe you're really not a Kohen, I don't know. He says, go to Rebbe Yoshev. Sent him to Rebbe Yoshev. Rebbe Yoshev said to him, I don't know what to do for you, but you know, people who are in pain, they should go to the Kotel HaMaravi and they should daven. Go to the Kotel HaMaravi and daven. So he goes to the Kotel HaMaravi and he's crying and crying and crying, and there's an American there. An American comes over to him and says, you seem so heartbroken. Maybe I can help you. He says, how can you help me? No one can help me. Only God can help me. He says, what's the problem? He says, I was married. I'm a Kohen. I was married for 15 years. I divorced my wife because she couldn't have children. I found out that she's pregnant. So he says, you know, listen, when a child is so heartbroken, I always find it's good to speak to one of your parents. Go speak to your father or to your mother. He says, well, my mother passed away. My father's alive. My father's in America. So go to your father in America. Tell him your problem. So he comes back and he says, crazy. I should go to America. I've been living in Israel my whole life. I should go to America to see my father. What's my father going to tell me? But Reb Chaim Kanievsky sent me to Rebbe Yoshev. Rebbe Yoshev sent me to the Kotel, and I met this guy at the Kotel. So he goes to America. And he goes and flies and meets with his father, and he tells his father this whole story. And his father says to him, I just want you to know that you're adopted. And I never told you were adopted. So you're really not a Kohen. But when we adopted you, the rabbi said we should raise you like a Kohen so no one should know that you're adopted. So you can go back and you can get remarried to her. And that's exactly what she did. We have a lady in our community who was married before and got divorced, then she married a Kohen. And everybody kept questioning her, how could she marry a Kohen? Because obviously her first marriage wasn't kosher. But she had a tshuva from her Moshe Feinstein. But everybody kept questioning, how could she marry a Kohen? She was divorced, she was divorced, she was divorced. So many people put their ketubah in a frame. She has in her living room the letter from her Moshe Feinstein, and she has it in a frame. She says she got so tired of everybody talking behind her back and everybody questioning her, so she put her Moshe Feinstein's letter in a frame, and like people have pictures in their living room, she has his letter. You are allowed to marry a Kohen. Because she got so tired of people talking about her. In life...
How was it possible so she married the Kohen after divorce?
Well, I have a case like that where a woman was married and I was mevatel the kiddushin because the kiddushin was not valid, and she got remarried to a Kohen, she has 2 children. So if the first marriage is considered not kosher, then she's not married. So even if she has a divorce, but if the marriage is not kosher, the divorce is not necessary, therefore you don't have a get, you can get married to a Kohen. It's not very easy to do.
She's not a virgin.
A Kohen doesn't have to marry. Kohen Gadol has to.
Oh yeah.
A regular Kohen can
In
marry.
our time?
Right. A regular Kohen can marry an almona, a widow.
Can I
Or
ask?
widow.
Yes.
Now you say if a first marriage wasn't kosher,
Right.
she can marry a second time to Kohen.
Correct.
Wow.
She can't marry a Kohen Gadol, but she can marry a Kohen. Now, a regular. I'm going to talk about this next year, not that much this year. A regular Kohen can marry a woman whose husband died.
Yeah.
That's called an almona.
Yes.
But a Kohen Gadol cannot.
Yeah.
Just
The reason is a shocking reason. Shocking reason. I think the Ben Ish Chai brings it down, and the Chidor brings it down, that if a Kohen Gadol can marry a woman whose husband died, you know what's going to happen? He's going to meet this beautiful woman, and he says, I really would like to marry her. But she's married. No problem. On Yom Kippur, when I'm in the Kodesh Kiddoshim,
I'm praying for that.
I'm going to say to Hashem, you know, Hashem, I could use a favor here. You know that guy? Kill him.
Abracadabra.
Right. Kill him. And he's in the Kodesh, and I gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
Here's the Kohen Gadol on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, and he's in the Kodesh Kiddoshim that if he makes the wrong move, he's going to get killed.
Yeah.
And he's davening for all the Jewish people, and in his prayers he's going to say, and by the way, there's this guy, you know, his name is Zalman or whatever it is. He has a great wife. I really like to marry her. Could you just knock him off for me?
All of divorce.
Right. What?
All of divorce.
No, we can't marry a divorced woman. We can only marry an almana.
Right.
So you got to knock him off for me because if he divorces her, I can't marry her.
That's why they cannot.
And therefore Hashem said, better make Kohanim Gedolim cannot marry divorced
But we
women.
don't have Kohen Gadol.
almonot.
In our time, we don't have Kohen Gadol.
No.
And just the opposite. Every Kohen thinks he's the Kohen Gadol.
I mean, thinking it's okay, but I mean, we don't have it.
Have you ever? Every Kohen thinks he's the Kohen Gadol.
Yeah.
We don't have a Kohen Gadol.
They say that my grandfather was Kohen Gadol.
There, you see, everybody was a Kohen Gadol. But it's so amazing because human nature is human nature. That means you can even be the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, fasting, in the Kodesh Kiddoshim, looking at the Aron Kodesh, and what are you thinking about? Not what you should be thinking about. Okay?
One more question, I'm sorry. In case, like what happened when he went to his father and the father said you are adopted. If he wouldn't adopt it, what's the, I mean, any
There would not have
possibility?
been much of a...
Luck.
There would not... What would have happened? There would have been...
Divorce,
a
that's it.
divorce.
Couldn't.
Yeah.
And when we do Gittin for Kohanim, we hesitate before we do a Kohen, again for a Kohen, because if he changes his mind, he cannot marry her back. Now,
But he's not
if
going
he
before.
does, you know,
He loses
it's osir. He loses his right to be a Kohen, you know, and his children, if he has any more children, are no longer Kohanim. He
Children.
violates a Torah mitzvah.
Children also not.
Yeah.
I mean,
Все.
when he had the children, they're
No.
already Kohen.
That's fine. Future children.
Future, I mean, yeah.
You know, it's a problem. These are problems that come up, okay? These are problems that come up.
Много проблем.
You know, it is what it is. It's just a little bit difficult. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead over here. A lot of different things. But I want to go into something else. It says in this week's Parsha, Usvartim lochem mimochras haShabbos. We have Sfirat HaOmer. Between Pesach to Shavuot, we count. How many days do we count? 49 days. And the 50th day is Shavuot. It so happens that during the time of Sfirat HaOmer, not during the Torah, but 1,000 or 2,000 years later, the students of Rabbi Akiva died. Why did they die? Because they didn't show respect. According to some traditions, they died for 32 days, and they stopped dying on the 33rd day. What's the 33rd day? Lag BaOmer. Okay. How many students died? 24,000. It's interesting that the Maharal says that the gematria of the word kavod is 32. You didn't show respect? The word respect is 32 days. Now listen to what the Pri Chodesh asks. He asks a fascinating question. The Pri Chodesh says, I don't get it, he says. Why is Lag BaOmer so special? Everybody says, you know what happened to Lag BaOmer? They stopped dying.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, they didn't stop dying. They had all died. That means by Lag BaOmer, the reason they stopped dying was because there was no one left to die. All 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. So if they all died, so day 33 and day 34 and day 35, no one died, big deal. There was no one left to die. They all died. So he says, I don't see what's so special about Lag BaOmer. His answer is fascinating. He says, on the 33rd day of the Omer, Rabbi Akiva walks into the Beis Medrash, and the place is empty. There's not one person there. They're all dead. No one there. He could have said, I quit. I give up. That's it. I'm out of here. Leave me alone. Instead, he went all over Israel, and he found 5 beacons of light, 5 superpowers, 5 superheroes. And he reestablished the Torah world. So Lag BaOmer is a celebration, not that the students died, but that Rabbi Akiva didn't give up. It's a fascinating thing. Fascinating. Who did he find? Let's go. Let's look at the 5 people. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, which was a Superman. He was a superhero. Rabbi Meir, the famous Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi. And Elazar ben Shamua. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Now in Shas, these names are found everywhere. And the halacha is like them. The halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Shamu and Rabbi Yossi, even Keneged the Rabbi. I mean, these were not just any 5 people. He found 5 Talmidim in the south, and he totally created a renewal of Torah. And this simcha, this ability to re-establish Torah, is part of the fiber of the Jewish people. And I'll explain to you why. Think about the Holocaust. Think about Europe for a moment. In Europe, Torah was destroyed. If you think about it, Slobodka was destroyed, Telz was destroyed, Ponevezh was destroyed, Nevardik was destroyed, Ger was destroyed, Bovov was destroyed, Lubavitch was destroyed, all the communities were destroyed. The only one yeshiva that got out to some degree was Mir. And they made it to Shanghai. But otherwise, it was destroyed. In America, there was no Torah. You had rabbis, you had shuls. But I remember when my father came to a bookstore in New York, he wanted to find a particular sefer, the Shop Shmeitzer. He wanted to buy a particular sefer. And the bookstore owner laughed at him and said to him, where are you from? You're an immigrant from Europe? He said, yeah. He says, you're fooling yourself. In America, we only print three types of books. A Siddur, a Machzor for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and a Chumash. That's it. We don't print Shulchan Aruchs, and we don't print Rambams, and we don't print Tehillims, and we don't print tours. We don't print any of that stuff. Nobody buys it. There's no climate to buy it. If you want to buy a Siddur, I can sell you a Siddur. You want to buy a Chumash, I'll sell you a Chumash. That's it. The Jews that came from Europe to America, they said no. And now, today, you walk into a bookstore, you can get every book you want, translated in 25 different languages. The amount of books, every week there's 10 new books being printed. How did that happen? Because the Rabbi Akivas of the Holocaust said, we're not giving in. Who were Rabbi Akivas of the Holocaust? Think about it. Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Ruderman, Rabbi Eliyahu Meir Bloch, the Ponevezher Rav, the Satmar Rav. The Satmar Rav was whisked out of a concentration camp. He was by himself. Now there's 10,000 Satmar Hasidim between Monroe and Williamsburg, Bovov, Vizhnitz, Ger, Belz, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Torah Vadas. That means, think about the yeshiva world. In 1946, none of it existed. It was a desert. It was as bad as Rabbi Akiva during the Sfira walking into the base Medrash, and it was empty. Nobody. These people, right, were superstars. So on Lag BaOmer, what do we celebrate? Why do we sing and light bonfires and dance and go to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's grave where it says, Lo tishkach mipi zaro? We celebrate that throughout history there existed superstars who refused to accept defeat. Think about it. The Rambam, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, the Ramah, Rashi, Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Chofetz Chaim. They all lived in horrible times. They all lived in the most difficult of environments that were so anti-Semite and anti-Jewish and anti-religion. And they all adopted one attitude. You know what that was? We're not going to give up. And don't think it was so easy. When Ezra came back from Bavel to Israel, you know what he found here in Israel? Horrible situation. You have to read the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. Everybody was intermarried. Everybody had non-Jewish wives. No one kept Shabbos. Anyone, nothing. Ezra and Nehemiah were this close to say, we're better off going back to Bavel. And that's why a lot of Jews never came from Bavel to Israel. That's why Bavel was so popular. That's why you have Talmud Bavli. You know, they stayed. Because they said, why do we got to go there? There's nothing there. Ezra and Nehemiah said, no, we're going to restructure Israel. We're going to remake Israel. So they did something no one ever did. They brought back the world back to the sphere, back to the Torah, back to where it was. And because of that, they did tremendous things. Okay, listen to this. A few more interesting little tidbits over here. Listen to this.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why was Nehemiah as powerful as Ezra? What's the reason that his book is not considered to be...
He was extremely powerful. Nehemiah, Ezra was a Kohen.
Right.
But without Nehemiah, he would never have been able to accomplish what he accomplished.
I mean, how come, he was a prophet too. So,
Yeah.
So how come he wasn't so powerful as Ezra?
I think he was just as powerful.
Because I read in the book of Me'am Loez, it says that since he was very harshful to the people.
Maybe he was tougher than he should have been.
Yeah, he was very tough to people, and that's one of the reasons that Hashem didn't like it, and that's why.
That could be.
That's what I don't know if the Rabbis agree with that opinion.
Not sure.
Not sure.
Listen to this. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah. It brings down there's a Tosfos in Avodah Zarah that brings down from Josephus. Josephus was a historian that lived during the days of the Romans. And he said something interesting. He said that the Romans never wanted a king. They appointed leaders who were senators, and the senators had a certain amount of servants that helped them. There was a particular senator whose wife was expecting and had a very difficult labor. She couldn't deliver. So they had to do a C-section. That's called a cesarean. And the child was born in the month of July, and therefore they named the child Julius.
Julius Caesar.
And because he was born through a cesarean C-section, he called himself Julius Caesar from Caesarean. And therefore, when he became the Caesar, the name Caesar became the new name of the king, because he was born Caesarean. And that's why we call a person born from a Caesarean, Caesarean, because it comes from Julius Caesar.
Caesar is a name of the person, used to be. I think.
Well, Caesarean maybe what it was.
To do,
So it's so fascinating that Julius Caesar was Julius Caesarean. That's why he called himself Caesar, and that became known as that. I found that to be a very interesting bit of information. Okay. The Orach Chaim HaKodesh says that when you count Sfiras HaOmer, you're supposed to count it standing up. Did you know that? You're supposed to stand up. And it seems why. And then they talk about whether or not they counted Sfiras HaOmer in the desert. And they said no. They only started to count Sfiras HaOmer when they came into Eretz Yisrael. Now, the Avudraham, he writes down something as follows. He says there are 6 mitzvos that have to be done standing up. 6 mitzvos that you have to do standing up. The first one, he says, is Kiddush Levana. When we're Mekadesh the moon, we're outside, we're standing up. The next one is Tzitzit. When we put on our talit, or our tzitzit, we have to be standing. The third one is shofar. When they blow shofar in shul, everyone is standing. The next one is lulav. When you do birkat on the lulav, you have to be standing. And the next one, he says, is brit milah. When you do a brit milah, everybody's standing. He says, why? Because these 6 mitzvot, the Torah says lochem. Usfartem lochem, count for you. By Kiddush Levana it says hachodesh hazeh lochem. By tzitzit it says v'hoya lochem l'tzitzit. By shofar it says yom teruah yiyeh lochem. By lulav it says ulakaktem lochem, take for you. And by brit milah it says himol lochem kol zachar. So we learn out from the word lochem, from the pasuk mehachel chemesh makomo, like tfuah is standing upright. So too, when you do these mitzvos all have to be done. No, there's 6. Sfirat HaOmer, and Kiddush Levana, Lulav,
Other mitzvot.
Tzitzit, Shofar, and Brit Milah.
I mean, other mitzvot are also standing.
Like what? I mean, we do Shemona Esrei standing, right? We daven, but we don't always daven all of Tefillah standing. Shema, we do sitting. Right? Kiddush. So now, it's interesting you say Kiddush, okay?
But on Shabbat days.
When on Friday night, you stand for Kiddush?
Saturday sit.
Hold it, but you stand for all of Kiddush. Okay, so some people, they stand for the first part, Vayachulu, and then they sit, because it's Kiddush b'mokom su'udah, and when you eat, you're supposed to be sitting. I happen to do a little bit like you. My wife thinks it's because my Bukharian association. I can't live that down.
You already Bukhari.
I probably am already. I do Kiddush standing up. The whole Kiddush standing up. But when I drink, I sit down.
Yeah, we are also.
Okay?
We say something.
I do the entire Kiddush standing up,
Drink also.
and I drink sitting down.
But we always sit.
No, Ben
And Shabbat lunch,
Sitting.
I do sitting the whole thing.
What else?
This is scary. This is scaring me now. Let's try one more thing. Havdalah. Do you do standing or sitting?
Sitting.
Sitting.
You see, now I stand for Havdalah because my father stood, but I drink sitting. But lately I've been getting tired for Havdalah, so I've been sitting.
But the halacha
And my wife thinks it's
Allah
also
says-
because
He did Allah that everybody's supposed to be sitting. you know.
Now, you're right. In yeshiva in Baltimore, in Ner Yisrael, they would make an announcement for everyone to sit down for Havdalah.
right.
So you're right.
Not what should we call the Lepidad Mekubalim.
Yes, they should be sitting.
Shulchan Aruch,
Right. The only reason why I stand for Havdalah is because my father stood. It's the only
It's a
reason.
minhag.
That's right. Now,
There's some Persian minhag, they stand up in Sharei Tova, right next to
Correct.
the Rabbi's house. When I was by them, they all was standing.
now you should know when I sit down, let's say for Havdalah in my house, everybody else sits down also.
Right.
And then sometimes I stand right up, and everybody stands up. I sit back down again. It's just driving me crazy. But just me.
But when you make the kiddush on Erev Shabbos,
Yes, Friday night.
when you drink, you have to sit and drink.
Yes, I
That's
do.
according to Shulchan Aruch,
Yes.
or it's also minhag.
No, I think more it's a minhag. I sit, and once a year I even lean. Just messing with you. Okay. Okay. The Ramah says that we have a custom to eat milk products on Shavuot, right? Famous custom. Some people have different customs. I mean, we generally have this 4 su'udot on Shavuot. There's 4 meals, right? Night, day, night, day. We generally only have one meal milk, and that's the first day lunch. And the reason is, well, the way it came about is because you're up all night learning.
Yeah.
So you come home at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. So then you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So you wake up about 1 o'clock. And then you're going to go back to sleep again. So since you just had a few hours sleep, my wife felt having a meat meal might be too much. So she thinks pasta and lasagna and all these other things is more appropriate.
Isn't digest.
Easier to digest. I generally, let's say I speak in the yeshiva in Hillcrest in Fresh Meadows, so I eat by one of the rabbonim there. So he serves the first night meal milchiks. So I end up having 2 meals of milchiks, but the rest is flesh. I'm a big meat guy. It's enough to have a cup of coffee in the morning to be yotze milk. Right. I'm not a big milk guy. So,
He's Bukhari.
but he brings down the Ramah. The Ramah says that the minhag is to have milk. Now, of course, the question always comes up, why? So some people say because on Shavuot they got the Torah. Once they got the Torah, they realized that all the meat that they had was not kosher. They didn't know the shechita laws, they didn't salt it, they couldn't go home and eat. What could they have? They could have milk, they could have cheese, because they weren't that complicated. That's the short answer. But he brings down a fascinating answer that we talked about over the years. On Shavuot, when Moshe gave the Torah, what happened 80 years before? What happened on Vav Sivan? Moshe was born Zayin Adar. How many months did Yocheved hide him? 3 months. Zayin Adar becomes Zayin Nisan is 1 month. Zayin ER is 2 months. Vav Zayin Sivan is 3 months. The day Moshe was put into the Nile was the day, 80 years later, he gave the Torah. Okay? Now, if you remember the story, Moshe was crying. And they felt he was hungry. So they wanted to give him milk, right, to nurse. And he wouldn't nurse from anybody but his mother. So there was a miracle that day that involved milk. So the Ramah says that's why the minhag is to have milk on Shavuot. It's a fascinating answer. Capish?
So how do we have
Who doesn't?
We have.
You don't have 1 meal milk on
No, we
Shavuot?
do. But
All the
we found
meals,
out.
almost Bukhari and all the meals, they make it milchiks.
Really? All the meals?
That's what they say, it should be all milchiks.
See, we have the different. We say all the meals should be fleishiks. 1 meal would make milchit. We don't make all the meals. Because, it's still yotzov, and there's a...
Бухарский говорит, что это молочный.
You have all the meals?
Бухарский так говорит. Но, לפי Шулхан Аруха, мясо и вино.
Курицу они потом делали.
You have all the meals milk?
Сначала
No.
milk, а потом курицу.
All the meals will have meat.
See?
No,
That's
usually-
a real.
usually
That's what I
chicken.
figured.
They do chicken.
Один праздник здесь мы еще
Вот
You know,
она-
you better get it straight before you get married.
В Союзе как это делали?
Тоже курицу, chicken.
Chicken.
So
Chicken
one
кушали,
milk
да?
and then the rest of the chicken, not meat. I mean,
You-
not
you
real,
were eating
I mean, not
chicken,
red
yeah?
meat.
Okay. I'll give you that chicken. I'll accept chicken as being meat also, but that's
Yeah.
fine. I'll let you have the chicken. But you only have one meal milk. You don't have all
Yeah,
the meals
yeah,
milk.
yeah. I never.
It's a little bit unusual. It's yontif, you know. You can have chicken soup. You can have whatever it is. Okay. Now let's go a little bit further. There's a pamphlet that they hand out in the shuls called Pninim al HaTorah. It's written by Rabbi Scheinbaum, who is a Rebbe, I think, in Cleveland, Ohio. Part of the Telz community, part of the Yavna community. Have you ever heard of this, Pninim al HaTorah? They put out booklets already. It's been for years, 15 years he's been doing this.
Can you
They're little pamphlets that they put out in the shuls on the Parasha. Listen to this story. Everybody has a different reaction to this story. Listen to this story. Because we just had Yom HaShoah recently, right? Holocaust Memorial Day, Israeli Independence Day. You know, we just had all these days. Years ago, Steven Spielberg put together a chronicle called Shoah. What was his intention? He wanted to interview as many Holocaust survivors as he could to talk about their experiences in the Holocaust. Because he wanted, these people were getting older. I mean, the Holocaust ended in 1945. How many years is that already? 70
71.
years.
71, yeah.
Right, 70 years. So if a person could remember the Holocaust, it means they were, let's say, 10 years old at the time. That means today they'd be 85 years old. So most of the people who went through the Holocaust are no longer here. In another 10 years, there won't be probably anyone left who saw the Holocaust, you know. We are second generations or third generations.
Spielberg mean the movie guy?
Yeah, so Steven Spielberg, the movie director, the famous person, so he put together a video and he got testimony from thousands of Holocaust survivors that there should be an archive, a record of it. Because in Iran today, they claim the Holocaust never happened, you know.
Yeah.
And there's no more like, you know, the guy that they just had a trial on in Germany who was a guard in Auschwitz, he's in his 90s. Because at the time, he had to be at least 18 years old or 20, plus 70 makes him 90. So there's nobody around anymore. There's really nobody anymore who you could point the finger and say he was a SS guy. It doesn't exist. So they asked this lady, they're videoing this lady, and they're asking her about her memories of the Holocaust. So they said to her, was there any memory from the Holocaust that was good? Do you have any good memory from Europe, from the Holocaust during that period of time? Any good memory? So she says, yes, I have a favorite memory. A favorite memory. Her most favorite memory. So they said to her, what is your most favorite memory? She says, the day the Nazis came and ripped me from my mother's hands. That's my favorite memory. Now, the guy thought she didn't understand the question, right? So he says, no, you don't understand the question. I don't want your most scary memory. I want your favorite memory, the memory that you remember the nicest, the most positive memory that you have of the Holocaust. And she says, yeah, I understand the question. The most favorite memory, I cherish it to this very day, was the moment the Nazis ripped me from my mother's hands.
And she's Jew.
She's Jewish. So he writes down that Steven Spielberg, or whoever was doing it, turned off the camera. And he stopped taping, and he said to her, something is wrong. That's a horrific memory. That's a horrible memory.
Compared to everything
Compared,
else.
so listen to what she answered. Listen to her answer. She said, when I was growing up, I had an older sister. Let's say my older sister's name was Rachel. You know what my mother would say to me? My mother would say to me, why can't you be like Rachel? Rachel is this, Rachel is that, Rachel is smart, Rachel is pretty, Rachel knows how to cook, Rachel knows how to sew. Every day, you know what I heard my whole life? Rachel, 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 Rachel. How come you can't be like Rachel? How come you're no good? Rachel is good, Rachel is good, Rachel is this, Rachel is that. When the Nazis came and took me from my mother, and my mother held on to me, and my mother screamed, don't go, was the first time I realized that my mother loves me. That's my best memory, she says. Until that moment, I believed my mother didn't love me. But when the Nazis came and took me from my mother, and my mother held on to me tight and screamed, don't go, don't take her, I realized my mother did love me. And that kept me going, and that's how I survived the Holocaust. That's my best memory. Because that's the day I realized my mother loved me. It's a fascinating story. Because we're parents, and we think we treat all the kids the same, but we don't always treat the kids the same.
No.
And we always sometimes say, your brother this, your sister that, and we don't realize what we're saying. And in schools, there's the good kids and the not the good kids, and the teachers love the good kids, and it's... And kids walk away and say, my teacher hates me, my Rabbi hates me. Because he always says, that kid's good, why can't I be like that kid? It's such a fact. We got to be so careful the way we express ourselves, the way we talk with ourselves. So, some people think the story is wow. Some people think the story is horrible. I don't know what to tell you. But it's a fascinating story. That was her favorite memory. Because she realized my mother does love me. And that made all the difference in the world. Have a good night,
And
everybody.
that gave her
To be
power.
continued.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very
And
much.
that gave her power.
That gave her the power to survive.
10 people, можем сидеть кадиш.
That gave